This happened when I was a bartender about 4 years ago, but I think about it often, and it has changed the way I operate throughout life. I now refuse to go to any store alone after midnight. For the story's sake, I will tell you ahead of time that I was 25 and an attractive/slender blonde at the time. On a busy Friday night, I was bartending with the bar manager, and he had noticed that we were very low on some bar necessities after the dinner rush. Lemons, limes, bitters, that sort of thing. So I was sent out to go to a 24-hour grocery store down the road to pick up the odds and ends that we would require to get us through the weekend. I picked up everything that was asked of me without much trouble at the store until I got to the liquor aisle. There were two country-looking guys that were probably around my age in the aisle. They were staring at me and whispering to each other in such a way that made me quite uncomfortable. I could only assume that they were making comments about me. All pretty innocent so far, though. Before they could approach me, I grabbed what I needed very quickly and power walked to the self-checkout. I really booked it out of there, because when you're a bartender, it's kind of like you're on stage and required to be charming and interact with people. The sorts of people you otherwise absolutely wouldn't even be able to tolerate unless you were getting paid to. Thus, why I am not a bartender anymore. Anyway, I get to the self-checkout and hot on my tail are those two guys. I start scanning my stuff in, and they plop down to use the scanning station right next to me. I get a better look at them now that they're so close. One is taller, muscular, quite average looking. The other is shorter and a bit more plump. They both looked dirty though, and their eyes were completely bloodshot. I'm not sure if they were high on something or had already been drinking for a while. They continued to stare at me, and our eyes awkwardly met. I did the pleasant mid-westerny thing to do and flashed them a quick half-assed closed-lipped smile to be polite. The taller one took this as an opportunity to try talking to me. "Hey, looks like you're getting ready for a party, huh?" I replied with something like, "Yeah, something like that, but not for me though." They walked closer to me and ignored their responsibility to scan their items. "Oh, must be for your boyfriend, huh?" I flashed that awkward, tight-lipped smile once again and rolled my eyes slightly. "This is your hint that I'm not interested, fellas." The taller one continued to try to talk to me though. "You could come hang out with us tonight. We could show you a real good time if you know what I mean." No thanks, I'm good, I have plans already." Well, the tall one started to get very upset that his moves weren't working like he'd hoped they would. He started to use a more threatening tone and moved in very close to me, about 2 inches away. I tried to ignore him and stay focused on the scanner. He was so close I could smell that he hadn't showered in a few days. He got a bit louder and said, "I see how it is. You only fuck doctors and rich men like that. You think you're too good for us. We can show you that you aren't. We can teach you a lesson." Now, I'm not sure in what context he meant that, but I'm sure there also wasn't any context that it was good. Still not looking at him, I turned away so my body was blocking his view of my purse, which I set on the scanner. I grabbed my 4-inch pocket knife out and slid it up my jacket sleeve, just in case I needed to protect myself. I acted like I was searching for my wallet. I do this, however, in view of the self-scan worker standing at her podium. I looked at her with wide eyes, trying to silently communicate that I did not feel safe, and I might soon need her help. I turned back to the machine and slid my credit card to pay, while the creepy and hostile guys were practically standing right on top of me. The machine malfunctioned and started beeping. The lady worker came over immediately, and the guys standing next to me changed their expressions from "I'm planning to torture you for a couple of days and toss your body in a creek" to "just your friendly good old country boys making polite conversation over here." They even tried to act like I knew them and we were friends, so the worker wouldn't be alerted to their ill intentions. They even tried joking with the worker, saying I was stealing something, and that's why the machine went off. Well, the worker definitely was not buying it. She was a 6-foot-tall woman with some muscle on her. I wouldn't mess with her on my best day. Anyway, she pressed a few buttons on the screen, shooting the guys a very unimpressed look when they were trying to act charming, and canceled the order completely. She turned to me and said, "I'm sorry for your inconvenience, ma'am. This machine seems to not be working correctly. Why don't you take your things and I'll ring you up at the actual register." She put her hand on my back and gave me a wide-eyed look like I gave her a minute earlier, letting me know she saw the danger. I picked my things up to follow her to a register that was near the security office. The guys lingered around the self-scan, still staring at me. Eventually, they completed their purchase, but stood still at the exit, assuming that they were waiting for me. I felt like I would be walking to my death if I made my exit in that moment. The worker kept a close eye on them and started scanning my items. As she was scanning, she told me there really wasn't anything wrong with the machine I was using. It just misread my credit card. I had a bad feeling about those guys from the moment they walked in. Then I saw them getting aggressive towards you. I already rang security to be ready to walk you out to the parking lot and make sure you left safely when you're ready to leave. When I saw you take that knife out and put it up your sleeve getting ready to protect yourself, good girl. As much as I'd like to see you show them they picked the wrong chick to mess with though, I'm glad I was able to pull you aside and make sure you're safe. I can see him waiting by the door for you, so I'll just keep pressing buttons on the screen and act like I'm having some trouble with your order or something until they go away. I thought to myself, this woman seriously deserves a raise. I thanked her over and over again and told her what they'd said to me. I was getting afraid because I didn't know what these men were capable of. Well, as I'm talking to her, the bar manager calls me to see what's going on. I explained what was happening. He was obviously quite concerned, and even got ready to come there himself and kick their asses. A sweet sentiment indeed. By the time I had hung up, the guys had given up though, and walked out to the parking lot. The worker told me to give it another few minutes, because she had a feeling they may still be there, waiting for me to walk out and see which vehicle was mine so they could follow me. My instant thought was, no way, they must be gone by now. Of course, I was wrong. The worker and security guard escorted me out. As it was after midnight, you can imagine just how empty the parking lot was. Back toward the end of the lot, there sat an old big pickup truck, running with the lights pointed toward the store. It was a huge parking lot, and it wouldn't have made sense for them to initially park like that. I assume they moved the truck to sit that way so they had a full view of when I exited the store to go to my vehicle. It was like being stalked by very hungry lions. When I unlocked my car, and they saw that me, the worker, and the guard were looking directly at them, and I wasn't getting in my car until we watched them leave, they peeled out of the parking lot. I mean, they seriously did a burnout to establish that they were pissed and trying to intimidate us or something. Poor creeps didn't get their way. Boo-hoo. I thanked the worker and the guard over and over again, as I was certain they had just saved my life, or at least saved me from having to live with whatever those guys were planning to do to me. I also wrote a long letter to the store manager and their corporate location, describing how the employees protected me and how grateful I was. I really hope that went a good way to earning them a promotion, a bonus, or at least something. She didn't know me at all, and was still ready to protect me, which really wasn't her job, but she did it anyways. Needless to say, I don't go late night shopping by myself anymore, and I never will again. To understand my story, you sorta have to know a tiny bit about trespassing laws in our country. Basically, we don't have any, so long as you're respectful and non-destructive at least. You can walk over any hills you like, and in my case, camp on any beach of your choosing, so long as once you leave, the area is exactly like how you found it. I used to love camping when I was little. Our family would go multiple times a year with a very large group of my parents' friends and their kids. On average, there were maybe 10 of us at a time, which was a bit of a logistical challenge, since we always headed out to this one really remote beach on the coast. Actually, we weren't the only ones either. There were always yachts bobbing just off the shore with people in them, and other campers lining up and down the beach. Most of them also had children or teenagers, so it wasn't a wild party scene kind of place. More like a very informal family holiday spot. There was even a small building with toilets and showers installed nearby, even though this place was in the middle of nowhere. I guess the local council must have figured it out and gotten sick of people peeing behind bushes. We took a trip up in spring of 2011. I'm really bad with time, but I know this because I got my dog in winter of 2010. After picking her out that November from the shelter as a birthday gift from me to me, as I paid her adoption fee. Reddit, I know you love dogs, and she will be very important to the story later on, so let me tell you a little bit about Parmesan. Parmesan came to me as a 6-month-old puppy who had been rescued from a dog-fighting situation. We're not entirely sure what breed she is exactly, but my best guess is a Lurcher Staffy mix. She's a wonderfully well-tempered dog with people, and most dogs. But of course, you absolutely do not threaten her or she'll have you. So, by the time of this camping trip, I'd had Parmesan for a few months. She'd never come camping with us before, but as far as my family are concerned, dogs go on camping trips too, so when we all piled into the car, she came along right with us. Unusually though, this time none of the family friends could make it, so it was only me, my sister, my dad, and my mom. I didn't mind though. I wasn't really that attached to the other kids. I'd rather play with my dog and my sister. The drive took the best part of 6 hours, and because we'd left a bit later than usual, although I don't remember exactly why, we arrived right around sunset. Not exactly a good time to be building a tent, but we'd expected to arrive to other campers already set up and the beach completely illuminated in campfires. This time, the beach was empty. In spite of this, my parents started taking stuff out and trying to build the tent. They asked us to fetch some of the lighter bags from the boot of the car, while they sat pointing a flashlight at the sand to see properly. I rolled down the window of the car for Parmesan before getting out. It was pretty hot for that time of year, and I wanted her to have some air. Always gotta be looking out for my furry little homie after all. As we're fumbling about in the dark on a beach in the middle of nowhere where it's pretty spooky, the one road that led to this beach was circular and had a bridge over the water, meaning you could basically circle around the beach in a big O shape if you felt like it. I wasn't really paying any attention to the road. I was complaining, I was tired as kids are wont to do. But my mom was. After maybe 15 minutes of my dad trying to nail the tent into the sand, my mom started asking him, "Hey, have you seen that car drive around? It's been by a few times." My dad just kind of shrugged her off sorta like that. I don't know if he said anything back to her, but after a few more minutes, I did see a car pull up next to ours on the road, and someone got out. It was maybe 15 or 20 feet from the cars to where we were, and the lighting was pretty low except for the torches. We weren't expecting to see anyone else out here at this point, and I think my mom said something like, "Must be security." I was skeptical though. Why would a random beach have security just for it? I think what she meant was the Wildlife Trust or something, as they do occasionally come down to do their nosy business. The guy was walking pretty unevenly. He must have been drunk or high or something, because he had that stagger to him. There was absolutely no way this guy was sober. Cool. A junkie. Not an unusual find, but it was rare to just see them in the wild. As he walked into flashlight range, we realized he was carrying a large knife, maybe 15 inches. Although I was small at the time, so maybe my sense of scale was a bit off. I don't like my dad, but credit to him. Once he saw this, he got up immediately, holding on to the camping mallet, and put us all behind him. The man began to shout wildly at us, saying we couldn't camp here, and he was just letting us know. My dad tried initially to be a bit low-key with the guy and told him that it was fine, we'd leave, but this didn't work. The man kept advancing on us, so my dad started shouting, and the man started shouting back. My sister and I were crying. I remember shaking. I was utterly terrified, as I'm sure anyone would be in that situation. It really did seem like this guy and my dad were going to fight it out, and to be honest, I didn't fancy my dad's chances. While it's grim to consider, I'm absolutely convinced he would have killed my dad, and possibly us as well once he was done, as I don't think my mother would have had the common sense to run with us. I love her to bits, but she's always put Dad and her relationship with him above us. This isn't how it went down, though. A bolt from the black, like a wolf descending on its prey, took us all by surprise, most of all the man with the knife. In that moment, Parmesan was the apex predator large canines represent in nature. She got him good by the arm, clamped down hard, ripping his jacket and shredding the skin underneath. He dropped the knife, as he had been holding it in the arm she had just grabbed him by. He kicked her and punched at her, and eventually managed to get her off. He grabbed the knife from the sand and ran back to his car and drove off. Parmesan did not follow him. She stayed with us, muzzle covered in blood. Quickly as we could, we gathered our things and all got back in the car, all pretty shook up over this incident. I gave Parmy a quick once-over. She was okay, but the car's window was much more open than I'd left it. We think what happened was when the shouting started, she must have put her paws up on the gap I'd left for her, as it was an old car and had the roll-down windows and not an electric button. She must have been able to hit it with her paws with enough force to put it down enough to squeeze out. That's not the end of my story, though. We were all pretty scared, and since we had the dog with us, we couldn't book into a hotel for the night. My parents decided to just drive home so we could all feel safe, but first we had to drive into the nearest town for petrol, as they were kind of low. I spent the time trying to clean Parmesan up a little. I'd always loved dogs, but what she'd just done for me blew my mind. As we drove into town, we came across a petrol station, but it looked closed. My dad drove up closer to get a better look, and stuck his head out the window to get a better look at the sign. My mom asked him what on earth he was doing, and he told her he was trying to see when it opens. My heart fucking sank. Parked in a corner, behind a van so we hadn't seen him at first, was that man with a knife. He was sitting on the bonnet of his car, using some tissue paper to clean up his arm. It honestly looked pretty bad. Without stopping to refuel or look anywhere else in town, my dad drove right out of there. He decided to go to the next town over, but this was the wrong move. The next town over turned out to be 60 miles away. He didn't have that much petrol, we realized, as we began driving. We were going to break down midway. That's fine, Dad said. We had AA cover. They'd come tow us home, or at least to somewhere acceptable for the night. Better than staying in the last town, at least. After driving for maybe 5 minutes or so, lights flash us from behind. Another car. The same car the man had been driving. It was him, following us. He must have realized we were low on petrol. The next half hour was one of the worst in my life. I had a complete and utter breakdown, as did everyone else really. I could tell my parents were trying to keep it under wraps, so it wouldn't upset us. But we weren't really small kids. We were both double digits, so we knew how dangerous this situation was. My dad turned off the radio to conserve petrol, and the man followed us for 55 miles before he peeled away onto another road. Our fuel meter was on the big red E for empty for the last 10, and we were driving on fumes. I don't really believe in God, but if he does really exist, that must have been one of his miracles. Once we got there, we drove into a petrol station and refilled to a full tank before driving the rest of the way home. My sister and I slept in the car after that. I only woke up once we made it all the way home, just grateful nothing worse had happened. After getting some sleep, my mom phoned the non-emergency line for the police and reported what had happened. They never got back to her after that, but apparently the woman she spoke to said that they may wish to in the future, as he matched the description given of a suspect wanted in relation to a murder charge. No idea if he actually was that guy or just a random psycho. As I said, they never got back to her. So, what's the takeaway from this story then? Well, for me, it's that I really love Parmesan. She's still with us now, old as the hills and twice as grizzled as one of my mom's friends likes to joke. I don't know why she did what she did that day. I couldn't tell you what her thought process was. What I do know is that this poor puppy was born into an environment where they abused and neglected her, only to be rescued and taken to a shelter where her mother and siblings all found homes before her. Despite how badly people had treated her, when I took her home she forgave, but never forgot. I think the saying is, I never trust a person who doesn't like a dog, but I always trust a dog when they don't like a person, you know? They have a very good understanding of human body language. I think she must have understood just how much danger we were in. By way of background, I live in Milwaukee, which has the honor of being the most racially segregated city in the entire country. It's a cool city overall, don't get me wrong, but we have some really shitty inner city with a ton of poverty and violence, and also gang activity. At the time this happened, I was living in a sort of in-between area. Not quite the ghetto, but not exactly a super nice area either. I was a 22-year-old single mom. I lived in a ground floor apartment on one of the main streets. I parked in the back alley behind the building. My front door faced the street and I had a side door too, with a walk running between my building and the one next door. Anyway, I got home in the middle of the afternoon on a Saturday with my kid. As we drove down the alley to get to my parking spot, I saw this guy in a hoodie sort of lurking around by where I parked. It was weird because it was quite warm outside and he had his hood all the way up, but there were a bunch of gangster wannabe kids in the neighborhood, so whatever. It was definitely an odd place to just be standing though. As I got close to the building and started pulling into my parking spot, he turned around and started walking toward the street, past my side door. He had definitely left because I had just arrived. I figured he was smoking a blunt or something. I didn't think anything of it. I got my son and some bags out of the car. I went the same way the guy had just taken, to my side door. I didn't see him at all. My son and I went inside, and I was in the process of putting stuff down when my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I immediately thought that it must be that guy. Being young and naive, I answered the front door. It was the same guy, still with his hood up. He immediately smiled at me, but not in a friendly way, more of a leer. He looked to be about 16, cornrows with a fake gold grill that was studded with these little fake diamonds. I regretted opening the door, but here I was, so I went with it. "Hi." He kept staring at me and said nothing. At this point, I saw another kid in a hoodie pacing behind him on the sidewalk and looking at us. I was quickly realizing this was not a good situation. My son, who I had momentarily forgotten about, came up behind me. He did the shy kid thing, where he stood behind me and poked his head out from behind my butt to look at the guy. The hoodie dude glanced at him for a couple of seconds, then back at me. "Yo, is Danielle around?" "I don't know who that is. Maybe try the other door." I gestured to my neighbor's door to my left. "You sure?" "Yeah, sorry." He left, walking in the opposite direction of my neighbor's door. Hoodie dude number 2 followed behind him. I thought it was really weird that they didn't even try to check the door for Danielle. I thought this whole thing was really weird, to be honest. My boyfriend got to my apartment a few minutes later, and I was really glad to see him. He had a really old Jeep that he always parked out front on the main street. When he went out to get something from his car shortly after he had arrived, it was gone. Fuck. Car theft was a pretty common thing in this neighborhood, but stealing it from the main street in broad daylight was pretty damn ballsy. We called the cops, filed a report, the whole 9 yards. I told the cop about the hoodie dudes, since it seemed like it could be important. I was able to give a good description of the guy who came to my door asking for Danielle. I had no idea if it would really be relevant, but the fact that the Jeep was stolen shortly after these guys were around seemed pretty suspicious. And that's where the story ended. At least until 2 days later, I got a call from a different cop with the downtown precinct. They told me they had found the Jeep, and other than the ignition, it wasn't really damaged. Yay! He asked if I could come downtown to do a lineup, see if I could identify the people who had knocked on my door right before the Jeep got taken. That was pretty weird. A lineup for a stolen car? But I agreed. He asked if I could come down in a couple of days. Also weird, why wouldn't they want me to do it right away? I was mostly focused, though, on the fact that doing a lineup was pretty fucking cool. So there I go down to the precinct a couple of days later. The way this went seemed sort of unorthodox, but I guess it was what it was. 2 detectives took me into a dark room where a woman in her 50s was sitting with a young woman in a wheelchair. The young woman's lower leg was in a giant cast with this big metal contraption surrounding it, maybe a dozen metal rods going into the cast itself. At this point, I had no idea what was happening. The detectives instructed us that we weren't to say anything during the lineup, except if we wanted the guys to turn around again or whatever, and we couldn't talk to each other at all. Okay. We ended up having to wait in the room for almost an hour in the dark, awkwardly not speaking. They explained it was taking more time than anticipated to get 12 guys from the jail over to the precinct. Finally, though, we got started. They did 2 lineups and gave us forms to mark 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. There was a large window in front of us, and they explained that the guys couldn't see us. They turned the lights on in the room behind that window and brought each guy in individually. I couldn't personally identify anyone in the first lineup. I felt sorta bad, actually, but I just couldn't. The second lineup started, and I didn't recognize guys 1, 2, or 3. Number 4 came out, though, and I immediately recognized the dude who had knocked on my door. He didn't have his stupid-looking grill anymore, but it was definitely the same guy. After the second lineup was done, they brought the other 2 men into the hallway and told me to stay put. After a few minutes, they came back to get me. The detectives asked if I recognized anyone. I told them I was sure about number 4 in the second, but couldn't identify anyone in the first. From what I gathered by this point, that hoodie dude number 2 must have been in the first lineup, but I hadn't ever gotten a good look at him while he was pacing on the sidewalk. They had me sign 2 forms, one for each lineup, with the second form identifying number 4 as hoodie dude number 1. When I gave the forms back, the detective told me that they could tell me what was actually going on now that the lineup was done. Good, because I was confused as fuck by this point. He explained that number 4 was indeed one of the guys they arrested with my boyfriend's Jeep. The guys had stolen the Jeep and driven to a nearby part of town, into a quiet and lily-white neighborhood. I'm also white, so this could be relevant. And they came across a young couple unloading groceries from their car. The young woman with the leg contraption was the female half of that couple. They parked the stolen Jeep behind them, got out, and immediately shot them both. They shot the woman in the leg and shot the young man right in his dick. He was still in the hospital in bad condition, which is why he wasn't there. The older woman was the girl's mom and had brought her from the hospital to do the lineup. The reason it was delayed a couple of days was because she had an emergency surgery to try to repair the damage to her leg. The guys didn't demand anything from the couple or take anything from them after the shooting. They just immediately shot them. The young woman managed to remember the license plate number of the Jeep, and they were apprehended in a corner store when a cop saw the stolen car parked outside shortly after the shooting. The shooters were both teenagers, but were being charged as adults. One of them had stupidly talked a bit before lawyering up, and had told the detective that it was a gang initiation. They had to shoot a white person. That was the price of admission. They had stolen my boyfriend's car after taking the bus out to the street I lived on. They figured it would be easier to get away if they had some wheels. The detectives were pretty sure I had been the original target of opportunity, but couldn't explain why they hadn't gone through with it. Nerves, they guessed. I knew why, though. It was because he had seen my kid peeking out from behind me. They told me I might have to testify if the case went to court, and told me I'd hear from the DA's office when they needed me. A couple of months later, one of the detectives called me and told me that the hoodie dudes pled out to attempted murder charges in exchange for reduced time. The guy who got shot in the dick luckily survived. I didn't ask how many years they got, but I assume they're probably still in prison these 13 years later. As an ironic postscript to this story, my boyfriend had the same Jeep stolen from the same spot in front of my apartment about 4 months later, also in broad daylight. That time they didn't find it right away though. He was staying over at my house weeks later when he got a call around 2 a.m. from the MPD arson unit. They had torched it and left it in the middle of the street in a notoriously violent area of the city. We decided to move after that. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here as always. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you guys enjoyed the content of this video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you do decide you like my content enough to subscribe, please be sure to hit the bell button right next to the subscribe button and turn notifications to all so you can be notified of every video I post in the future. If you don't feel like doing that though, I post a video nearly every day, so you can just come back every now and then and check up on what you missed. If you guys have any criticisms on what I can do better or any feedback on the stories in the video, please be sure to leave them in the comments below, as I always enjoy reading all the comments and I try to give them hearts and respond when I can. If you guys would like to reach me for any reason, or you would like to send in a story to be read, you can go ahead and take a look in the description below the video. You'll find a link to all of my social media, including my Facebook, Gmail, and Twitter accounts. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is if it has one, what type of story it is if it has a theme, and how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. Last but not least, I also run 2 other channels, Mr. Blue Skies and Darkest Hour, where I do true crime videos and dark documentaries respectively. If that kind of content sounds interesting to you, why not go ahead and check it out and see if it is for you. Aside from that though, guys, I think that's pretty much it for now, so thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.